I just wanted her, and I decided I was going to have her. Now, I did think, I'm not gay. It's just her. That was my story the entire time I dated her. I did not identify as gay. I was just like, it's just this one woman. I'm attracted to her. But when we broke up, I realized, I think I may be this lesbian thing because...
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. It is a $10 million question. Is our sexual identity a choice or an orientation? Today we talk about that with our guest, Grace, as she discusses her life as a Black lesbian in rural Georgia.
So my name is Danietta Queen Tribling. Queen is my real name. I always tell people that because they think that it's my nickname. Grace is actually my nickname. I prefer to be called Grace versus Danietta, and I like to clarify that so people understand. And I show up in the world at this point in my life just living my best life. I think I'm more clear now than ever about who I am, and although I'm still learning, I think I always will be, I'm still so good with who I am and just embracing my extra and all that comes with being Grace Queen Tribling. So I'm an advocate. I am a people connector. I am a writer. I am a great communicator. I am quite a few things, and I think they're all positive. The things that aren't positive, I'm working on them.
How did you come to get the nickname Grace?
I nicknamed myself Grace. I've always loved Grace, and I love Simone. So at one point in my life, I thought that I wanted my name to be Simone. I just liked the way it sounded when it came off of my lips. I don't know. But I thought Danietta was too many syllables. People often would see it, and although it's very clear, it doesn't have any extra consonants or anything, they'd still call me Danielle or Donetta or Donita. Like, they'd always botch it up. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I got to come with a one-syllable name that's easy to pronounce, and that people won't find a way to turn it into something else. And I felt like I was possibly being discriminated against, or I thought people would possibly discriminate against me if they saw Danietta, and I wasn't okay with it. I just didn't like the way it sounded. So I changed my own name unofficially.
How old were you?
I was in my late 40s.
Okay.
I was just like, I'm Grace. I like the way it sounds, and I'm going to be Grace. And I started calling myself Grace. As I met new people, I introduced myself as Grace. It was easy. I didn't get any pushback. And there it is. I'm Grace.
How did your mother react to your renaming yourself?
She had a problem when she saw that I was really serious. I knew that she had a problem because it didn't matter who else called me Grace. She would still refer to me as Danietta. And it's not so, my government name, as I call it, it's not upsetting to me, but I still feel like the respectful thing to do is to address me as I ask to be addressed. So once she realized I wasn't going through a little phase, we had to have, I call it the come to Jesus conversation. And I broke down to her some of the reasons that I didn't like Danietta. And I went into more detail when I was speaking to her about it. And although she understood, she still, I think at the end of that conversation, she still said, okay, Danietta. So now, I mean, of course, I respond regardless. If she says, because my family used to call me Donnie when I was growing up. So whatever she calls me, it's not so deep, or I don't feel so rigid about it that I won't respond. Some people call me my last name, Queen. Some people call me Danietta. Some people call me Grace. As long as it's within the perimeters of respect and decency, for the most part, I'll answer. And she still hasn't fully wrapped her mind around it, but because we're in different states and we're not constantly interacting, we typically speak a couple of times a day, and we pray every day in the morning, and then we check on each other at night to be sure we're in safely. There are not that many opportunities where we have to even call each other by name. I call her Bren, short for Brenda, and she calls me whatever, or we just start greeting each other, good morning. We don't even have to say my name that often, but she used to tell me that my dad gave me that name, which was another reason I was happy to rid myself of it. But later, she said she gave it to me, and I didn't even debate with her about which story was most accurate. I just gave her my reasons, and then we moved forward.
We'll get back to your mom later because she's an interesting key in your story. There were a lot of interesting things that happened to you in your early 40s, late 30s. And one of them that I want us to focus on for a little bit today is your choosing, as you say, choosing to be a lesbian. And tell us a little bit about how you made that choice and what life has been like for you since you made that choice.
So at the time, it was not a very conscious decision. For me, it wasn't that I proclaimed to the world in just one moment, I'm a lesbian today. It wasn't that. It was just I'd been dating men my entire life. The thought never crossed my mind to date a woman. It just wasn't an option. I never considered myself homophobic. I grew up in Washington, D.C., in the heart of the city. So I always came across people who were gay, and I had no problems with them. It just wasn't what I ever thought of. I was always attracted to men. But as I got older, I was just attracted to a loving, healthy, whole relationship. And I was much more conscious of what I felt. And in a class, I was taking a college level course, and one of my classmates, I found her to be attractive, and I wanted to go beyond just me being my naturally flirty self. I wanted to know more about her beyond in the classroom, and I guess I consider myself to be a free spirit. It's just not enough for me to wonder what something is going to be. I need to follow it all the way through and see what the end is going to be. And it wasn't just a sexual attraction. I was intrigued by her intellect. Everything she said piqued my interest, or I felt like some way we were connected and had so many things in common. I wanted to know more about her. And so in that moment, I made a decision. Okay, she's a woman, but so what? I'm going to take it a step further. And that was my first lesbian moment. I was in my late 30s.
So you had no glimpses whatsoever in your past life that there could have been some lesbian inkling there?
No, never. And the thing is, because I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., when I tell people that, other lesbians or even men, they always reference some pride event in D.C. or one of the clubs from back in the day, one of the lesbian or gay like tracks or one of the clubs back in D.C. And they start reminiscing about these wonderful D.C. gay moments. And I can't relate because my entire life I was there, but that wasn't my life. That wasn't my world. I don't have any of those memories. I almost resent it that I wasn't gay earlier. But, it was a late life experience for me.
So once you discovered that you were sexually attracted to your classmate, how did that shape your world at that point in time?
Well, it wasn't initially, I guess you could say it was a sexual attraction because my attraction to people typically is from an intellectual perspective. And then, of course, that's sexy to me. So I was grown, so I probably didn't have some of the challenges that a lot of people have, in that they're living with their parents or some authoritative figure where they need their approval, and they're worried about all of these other, myriad issues that will affect their lives as a result of them coming out. Mm-hmm. Those weren't my concerns. I was grown. I had my own income, my own everything for the most part. My son, everyone that I'm dating, they're trying to get on his good side and impress him. So he was down for the cause. He didn't care. As long as they were nice to me, he figured it would make his life easier. I was distracted and I'm happy, so he's happy. So he didn't give me any direct pushback. And if there was something going on with him as it related to me and who I was dating, he would never share it with me. And we've had multiple conversations. He'd witnessed me being in some really painful situations. So he really didn't care. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I can take credit for him growing up to be so open and kind, but he was happy that I was happy. And I always say the people that maybe had a problem with it, they didn't confront me about it. So I'm sure there were conversations and it was juicy, salacious news for some people, but they weren't concerned enough or bold enough, I may add, to confront me. But I'm sure there was some behind the scenes talk. But, I was almost 40. I didn't depend on any of those people for my livelihood. So
what was your relational life before this? Had you been married?
Yes, I was married to my son's father. I got married the first time when I was 22. Mm-hmm. So, I was married for 9 years, divorced early 30s. So there was a big gap, a dating period, a long dating period before I remarried very recently in the last 3 years to a woman. There was a big gap. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was married and married to a man. Mm-hmm. So we grew up.
You and your son?
My son and I, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Just the two of us, he and I, for the most part. And I say grow up because a lot of, self-reflection, acknowledgement, and just clarity about what I wanted in a relationship. It became apparent during that big gap in the middle.
Did your son's father have any conversation with you about this change, or did he have anything to say about it?
He did not. He was off living his life, not consistent in his relationship with my son. I'm sure he probably interrogated my son, but those were conversations that did not include me. Mm-hmm. For the most part, my extended family helped me with my son. My son had his own relationship with my ex-husband and his family. There was no hard feelings between us that I'm aware of, but we were still very much disconnected. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So whatever they thought, again, they fell in that group of they may have talked about me, but not to me, nor did they come to me and ask me. I sort of felt more in control when I told people before, I just took the juice out of it. Like, I'm getting married and I'm marrying a woman. I just want you to know so you won't be caught off guard. I hope you're happy. I'm ecstatic. And then I moved on. Like, I feel empowered when I share it versus all of the, small talk and the speculation. And just, if you're a homophobe, let me give you that opportunity to back out of a potential friendship or workship or whatever kind of ship, that relationship will fall into. Let me clear the table on the front end.
How do you name yourself? Some people like the term lesbian, same gender loving, dyke. How do you name yourself?
I'm not very secretive, and sometimes I tell people, especially students, what makes things juicy is when it's like some shame and, it's secretive. But my life doesn't affect your life in any way. Who I love, who I sleep with, none of that has anything to do with you. if you need to know and somehow it helps you to distract you from what you got going on, then let me tell you so you can move on to somebody else's secret. So if you call me lesbian, fine.
I guess what I'm getting at is in the LGBT community, the way in which we name ourselves is important. And I know some people feel very comfortable calling themselves a lesbian, and some people feel very comfortable saying same gender loving and don't like lesbian. Or some people say, hey, I'm just a dyke. And as you talk about your sexual identity, what label or what name do you use for that? Or is that naming important to you?
I think when I'm referencing myself, I usually say I'm a lesbian, and it depends on the audience or the person that I'm speaking to also. But I say I'm in a same gender loving marriage. Either of those, I don't even think to say dyke. And it's not that if I'm in a joking situation and somebody says, oh, you dyke, like it doesn't offend me. It's just, it doesn't naturally come into my mind to reference myself as a dyke. I had an older patient once say to me, oh, you don't look like a dyke. It was cute. Like, it was funny to me. It didn't in any way. I took that opportunity to kind of challenge her a bit and just kind of have a conversation about it in more depth. But it didn't offend me. So as I reference myself, it would probably be lesbian most of the time. I don't give it a lot of thought, though, Angela.
Well, it's fascinating because words like dyke and queer were once so terribly derogatory, and then they've been reclaimed and used as really a badge of honor with many different people. So that's an important piece of the conversation because it's curious, as someone who comes out later in life, it's fascinating to understand what are the political places that person stands in terms of their sexual identity, what information leads them to a place of their naming them something specifically, how do they view the world in the larger LGBT community, because coming in as a full-grown person is very different, I imagine, than someone who had a clear understanding in their teenage years or younger that they were different and that their sexual identity was to be found in the LGBT community.
I agree. I'm not afraid. And that's what I constantly tell myself. So because I'm not afraid, I feel more comfortable outing myself in all situations. And I just constantly tell myself, I'm not afraid. So I'm not afraid to not get this job, or I'm not afraid to not have this particular friendship or relationship in whatever way, whether it be a biological family member or otherwise. I'm just not afraid. I refuse to be afraid. So I approach the world the same way straight people do. Just, it's not a top priority conversation or issue for me. I always end up, I guess, on the liberal end of the spectrum if I'm forced to choose, because across the board, I think all people should be loved and treated well. But in terms of me being in a lesbian relationship, I just find it more comfortable that I put it out there on the front end so that later I'm not disappointed when I find out that person is a homophobe.
Yes.
That's what I find is the biggest problem with being closeted or, you know, being secretive and not being transparent is people come back and they feel deceived. Either way, it turns out to be sort of a hurtful scenario. Although I don't feel it should be important, let me just tell you on the front end, I'm married to a woman. So that way I don't have to worry about slipping and saying her name or, you know, just all of those little things that come with keeping secrets.
How do most people respond when you are so honest with them about that?
It's funny because you get the stereotypical conversations where they kind of go old school church. Like they could just be the biggest devil alive and they go and well, they either go with the Adam made Eve, not Steve story, or the I love everybody. All sins are the same. And they don't realize that that statement alone is offensive because I don't feel like my relationship, the person that I love, anything about it is sinful. So I usually get that one. I love everybody. I got a cousin that's gay, and that's my best friend. She always teaches me how to wear my clothes. You know, it just goes straight into the stereotypes. But in most instances, they have good intentions, I think. I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in. I get that one. My goal is not to have you put me anywhere. I'm completely okay. I often tell people, I want you to focus on you. If you could just focus on getting yourself to wherever you want to go, we're okay over here.
It's interesting to hear you say you're not afraid, because you're not living a life of being open in Atlanta. You are in the rural southern part of Georgia, which is very different. You know, we say that Atlanta is Atlanta and Georgia's the rest of the state. Things are quite different. And to not have fear in being so open there, people would find that to be very interesting, because a lot of people, I would imagine, would be afraid of being so clear and open about who they are in these rural southern parts of our country.
For the most part, people have been kind to me. And again, we are in the South, you know, where everybody blesses your heart and gives you, you know, a glass of sweet tea while they're stabbing you. However, from what I can tell, at least publicly and from a politically correct legal perspective, I've been treated well. And I don't leave room for people to pour venom. If I see that we're not on the same page, I'm fine with that. I don't want to be converted. I don't feel like I'm living some terrible life of sin and I'm doomed to hell. And I try not to put myself in places where that's going to be a topic. So we, you know, live our own little gay life in our little gay bubble in our little gay home. And I tell people often, we deal with the same issues that any other married couple deals with. And we're not living some Pornhub life, you know, with video cameras rolling. We are working through the same issues as any other couple, period. I'm not very politically active unless prompted. So I'm not trying to convert my hometown into accepting and loving me based on who I choose to love. But I'm not afraid either. And if asked or in any way put in a position where I have to state what I believe, what I stand for, who I love, no question, I'm here for it. I think anybody sees us, they pretty much know.
What does that mean?
They know, they look at us and they assume that we are gay or that we're in the same gender loving relationship, we're lesbians, we're all of those dykes, all of that. But it's something about our presence that, you know, people just don't come to us with a lot of foolishness. And if they do, they're going to come to me first because I'm much more social than my wife. My wife, anyone can look at her and just know she's no nonsense. You better come at her in a certain way or the consequences, you know, she's just going to say what's on her mind and it's no fluffiness at all. I'm going to be far more sweet about our exchange, at least initially. So people don't bother us, maybe because we're older and we go to work and we come home.
So when you say people on the street see you and make the assumption that you are lesbians, is that because of one of you appearing more butch than the other? Or is that, okay?
Yes, I'm definitely much more feminine in the way that we dress, just our demeanor in general. We both have on wedding rings. It's obvious in our interactions with each other that we're a couple. We're not very open about, you know, public displays of affection. Although if we want to give each other a kiss or a hug or hold hands, it's not a thought. We don't think, oh, can we hold hands here? It's just natural, as it should be with any couple. So that's why I say anyone can assume by looking at us that our relationship is more than two besties.
Mm-hmm. I think what is so amazing to me is how we either forget or we don't know just the real difference it is to walk on a street today and have that erotic clarity, as opposed to, let's say, in the 50s and 60s when Lauren Hansberry was writing, and she wrote a piece to The Ladder, and she was talking, which was a lesbian newspaper magazine. Mm-hmm. And she made this comment about lesbians needing to appear heterosexual mm-hmm. on the street mm-hmm. so they would not offend anyone, basically. And here you have this incredibly fierce, radical woman who at that point in time was not publicly to the larger world mm-hmm. Known as a lesbian or as a woman who loved other women. But that is such a long way from where we are now, where there is a sense of pride and freedom of walking in the street, clearly identified mm-hmm. as lesbians.
Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine, and that's where I'm naive because I didn't love a woman or I wasn't in a same gender loving relationship until my late 30s. So those sort of experiences I haven't had, and that might be part of the reason why I'm not afraid, because those weren't my experiences. I was completely naive to any of that even happening. Even though I lived in D.C., I knew many gay people of both genders, but their real experiences, some of the abuses, the struggles, I was totally in another world, completely naive to all of it. Mm-hmm. So
that's fascinating, because I wonder how other individuals, or specifically other women who come out in there, and I know you said it wasn't a coming out for you because mm-hmm. you never had something to come out of.
Right. Like I feel like I cheat people. They're like, wow, you came out. And it's like, no, I'm just being me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to take credit or in some way appear like I'm just so super bold because I came out. Like, no, it's just like I saw her. I liked the way she sounded. Mm-hmm. I liked what she was talking about. I was like, okay, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm have you.
That speaks to this idea of choice, whereas a lot of people find that in order to fight for equality for gay and lesbian and bisexual transgender people, we have to talk about it being a point of from birth. Mm. And this idea of being born queer and choosing queerness is something that really almost are two battle lines. But mm-hmm. I think it may be very interesting to think about, what does it mean to live in a world where all of that can happen and all of that is right and okay. Because clearly, as you've been talking, your experience has been something of identifying this attraction and pursuing it.
Right. And just not even thinking beyond that moment. I was attracted. I wanted a healthy relationship. I identified with her on so many levels, and I was not going to deprive myself mm-hmm. of exploring it. And of course, after the fact, when I realized it was going to be more, I thought about it and I still decided I was going to move forward. But I was so much older, I just didn't have the challenges that many other people have experienced it or are experiencing. I just wanted her, and I decided I was going to have her. Now, I did think, I'm not gay, it's just her. That was my story the entire time I dated her. I did not identify as gay. I was just like, it's just this one woman. I'm attracted to her. But when we broke up, I realized, I think I may be this lesbian thing because it was another woman, and I was open and ready, no pun intended, mm-hmm. but I really was at that point like, okay, I guess I'm the dyke because mm-hmm. we're going to do this thing, you mm-hmm. know.
Mm-hmm. So that gave you a sense of clarity that this was not just a phase.
Right, mm-hmm. right. I didn't own lesbianism for me or identify as when I dated that first woman. Mm-hmm. But after that, had to have a come to Jesus dialogue internally.
Well, some people may question, well, Grace, how do you know that you're really a lesbian and not bisexual?
I identify as a lesbian, and I plan on being married to the same person until the next life. So I think that would make me lesbian. However, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it because there are so many other issues competing for that space in my head. I just don't find myself in situations where I have to debate or justify, clarify, validate whether I'm lesbian or bisexual or any of those labels. I'm not saying they aren't important, but just for my specific life and situation, I know that after 50, mortality has become so much more clear for me and evident, and I'm just very conscious of time, and I choose again to not waste my time. It does feel like a waste debating with somebody about what label to embrace.
Let's circle back to your mom, because we had a conversation a little bit before we started, about just the fierce and beautiful relationship you all have. Tell me a little bit about your relationship and what makes it unique as mother and daughter.
My mom is a pastor. She is the most loving, forgiving, to the point of ad nauseum person I have ever met. And I always tell people, if anybody gets in heaven, she's going there. And if she doesn't, nobody's going. But she's just churchy in the most traditional way. Very, very, very churchy. Pastor, evangelical, Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized, tongue speaking person.
With a lesbian daughter. Who is married.
Who is married and very, very out, open, unapologetic, free. That's me.
How did that happen?
I think because in many ways, she is very much, a Jesus cheerleader. But she's also very loving, and she loves me, I believe, more than she loves religion. And she loves, as I do, how our relationship has grown and evolved over the years in spite of all of the challenges that we've had. Even when we don't agree about certain things, we can actually have a conversation about it and just explain why we feel the way that we feel. But overall, she still loves me and she loves my wife, and we are proud of her. We seek her love and approval. Like, she's a safe space for us, and vice versa. And I'm sure she's had to have debates and conversations and possibly defend her position on our relationship privately, not in our company. And some things I'm sure she's not shared with us. Some things people may have said, or churchy people, relatives, whoever. But the bottom line is, she still is there for me. When I call on her for advice, she prays for me. She prays for my wife. She prays for our marriage. Any of our endeavors I can share with her.
When you came out to her, how did you do it, and what did she say to you?
She probably had to ask me, like, are you gay? Because I'm sure it was very uneventful. So I didn't have to make an announcement, but I probably just showed up with the woman. You know what I mean? And somebody else asked her, and she in turn had to get up the nerve to confront me.
So she confronted you initially?
I believe she asked me, so like, that's your girlfriend, or you actually dating that person? Something along those lines. But it was so uneventful that I can't pinpoint the day, or I can't pinpoint a conversation, because the way that I am is just sort of like, this is how it is. This is my package.
Did she give you any objection, or it was just like, this is what it is, and from that point forward she was okay? She never tried to pray the gay away?
I'm sure she did secretly. And I know initially her approach to me was like, sin is sin, But I had to explain to her that that's offensive to me too, because to constantly refer or reference my relationship as sin, it's just not going to make for a healthy exchange between us. So we've gotten over so many hurdles just by addressing it and discussing our position. We've both evolved, I think, and just have become so much closer and aware as a result of my lesbianism. So I feel like I'm a gift all over again. You know, I feel like I've opened up an education as a result. And I love that she does. I don't feel like she hides me or she apologizes for me. She'll take me anywhere, you know, the three of us. So she loves my wife and it makes me smile. I'm thinking about it, but we have a really cool relationship, the three of us, the two of them independently, the three of us, and even past relationships. They love my mom and my mom loves them.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said she loves you more than she loves religion.
Right, she does.
And unfortunately, that's not always the case with many of our family members.
Right.
And so that's a real, as I see it, a real gift for both of you, for her to extend that love and for you to be present and to receive and extend love as well.
And it's not condescending. We've grown beyond that. I know you gay, but I love you anyway. Like almost like pity. It's not that. We've grown. Initially, it may have been, but we've grown beyond all of those because I address every single one. As they come, you know, let's kind of deal with this issue, talk through it, and then we move forward where we both feel respected and loved. And it's grown both of us. And I know she's had to take some hits probably as a result of me and my marriage, and my son too, probably. But we just talk. We talk through it, and she does. I feel so loved by her. Not loved in a pity kind of way. Loved and accepted. Not tolerated, but accepted. So I think that's the difference. That's what distinguishes our relationship.
You are 52.
I'm 51.
Oh,
Angela.
You are 51.
I'm in my 52nd year, though. October 8th is coming.
You are 51.
Yes, ma'am.
You are a woman who came to understand something very special and beautiful about herself, her sexual identity, in the late part, another stage of your sexual identity. And you're married.
I am.
And as you say, you are extra.
I am.
All of that being at the place that you are, I think provides us a segue into talking about what does it mean to be in your 50s, to be a Black lesbian, to be married, and to really feeling that it's time for you to embrace all of who you are.
So I like to say that I embrace my extra, but it's good extra, you know, and there is a negative connotation, especially in the Black community. People go, you're extra, you're doing too much. And when people say I'm extra or I'm weird or you're doing too much, it used to hurt. And I've constantly found myself trying to conform, trying to pull back, to not be as passionate, to not be as excited, to not be me. And it was exhausting. It was exhausting. And it never worked. And whoever or whatever that situation was, that relationship still wouldn't work because it became apparent after a while that I wasn't bringing my authentic self. So I just focus on being the best extra weird person I can be, spreading love and positivity and all kinds of corny, syrupy, you know, just, it's like how I'm wired. It's who God made me to be. If it doesn't fit, then we didn't have a puzzle to begin with. But I stopped apologizing.
Well, you know, Zami Nobles is very important and unique, the organization, in that it's the National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging. And we really do see, as the saying goes, that aging is not a disease, it's an opportunity. And so for those of us who are in our 50s and really at this rather pivotal point in life, it's so important to celebrate all of what that is,
Right.
The idea of growing older and the opportunities that come with it. Now, as you reflect on who you are as a woman in her early 50s, what have you learned since the time you were in your early 30s?
That people, that saying, and I don't know who to give credit to for saying it, but people really will treat you the way you train them to. And so instead of conforming to adapt to other people's comfort level, I'm just me, and you either adapt to me and who I am, or you move on, living your best life, and I live mine. So I wish I would have been that courageous in my 30s. I was still very much trying to dim who I am. Just who I am. It's not even always light. I make a very conscious effort to be light, but there are some times when it just is not light. But even still, just being who I am, fully embracing everything that makes me me. So I wish I would have been cool with embracing everything under my extra umbrella.
What advice would you give to a woman who is in her 50s, 60s, 70s, who makes the discovery, one day she wakes up and discovers that she's attracted to women? What would you say to her?
I feel like this is the best time of my life. I feel so free and uninhibited. And part of that is just being okay with not being like everybody else. And the ones that don't like me, it's okay. So to those people, I would say time is of the essence. And now that you are clear about who you really are, there's no time to waste. So find your tribe, first of all. Gravitate to people who love you, encourage you, and who want the same things for you that you do. And understand that people are going to talk regardless. Whether you do something that they accept or not, they're going to talk. When you're dead, they're still going to talk. If I was worried about the talk and whether someone else accepted who I choose to love, I'd be consumed with that. And at this point, time matters. Time is of the essence. I'm clear about my age and in terms of statistics, how much longer on this planet I have. And I just want to seize every moment. So I'd say find your tribe and then live life fully. Be your authentic self. Yeah.
Thank you for being part of our Black Lesbian Her Story.
Thank you for allowing me to be part of your Black Lesbian Her Story.
Thank you for such a great conversation, Grace. It's wonderful to know that we show up in the world in many different ways. And if you're a listener who wants to weigh in on this conversation, please feel free to leave feedback or comments wherever you listen to the podcast. Thanks for listening, and as always, have a great one.